Hi everybody, Rob Lyons here with Treksphere, and we are back for the next part in our look at the new 1/1000 scale Enterprise model kit from Round 2 Models. This is the Discovery Enterprise, this particular kit right here. In this video, we're going to take a look at constructing one of the nacelles. Getting the nacelle constructed is probably going to be one of the most challenging aspects of this particular kit. So we thought it might be helpful to take an in-depth look at how a nacelle comes together. All right, now we're going to move into assembling the motors into their housings and get this sub-assembly together. In the lighting kit, each motor is keyed, so one is left and one is right. So we just slip that in through here. Bring that wiring all the way through. When I was first playing around with this, I kind of thought this was supposed to be a tension fit, and I put a little too much pressure on the motor, and I actually wound up snapping and having to re-solder the connections. So just be aware, this is not a friction fit setup. You will need to do some gluing. I'm just going to use some super glue right here where the housing and the motor meet. I'm just going to go all around, just give it a light brushing. And as you notice there, I just popped it forward a little bit and back to try to get a little bit of the glue into the housing itself. There we go. And I'm just going to go through here, take off some of that excess. All right. So, hopefully, very carefully, so I don't get my fingers stuck. We're going to move on now. The next piece is this collar. This will connect ultimately to the fan blade system, but you need this as a standoff in order to ensure that everything goes in correctly. Again, at first it looks like maybe it's supposed to be a friction fit, and you might have a little bit of concern about putting any glue on the little cross piece in there, but it does need that glue in order to turn. So I'm just going to brush a slight bit on. And this end has a shallow end and a deeper end. The shallow end is going to face down, and I'm going to just, for the sake of getting this in a little bit better, I'm going to use my tweezers. There we go. And just put some pressure on that for a moment. All right, now here's the point where we want to make sure, given everything we've just done, that the motor is going to run. Make sure I didn't get any of the glue into the motor assembly. So we're going to connect that motor assembly to the circuit board. And let's see. And we have a spinning adapter. All right. So for our next step, we are going to fit in the lights. There are 4 lights here. There's a channel at the base where it's supposed to connect in through here. So we'll just run that connector out the back end there. We're going to get that rotated around to the right angle. Just going to take us a moment here. These parts are a little tricky to get in there we go, in the right space, but once you get them, should be good. Now, we're just gonna give that a little push in there so it's hopefully relatively stable. Oop, keeps popping. Getting used to that. And once again, gonna go in there with the super glue. This time around, you wanna be really careful not to get any on, you don't wanna get any on those lights that are in there. And so you go actually to the side initially to start your super gluing. We'll let that set up on that side for just a second. Popped a little bit loose. Let's put a little bit of pressure on that. Not too much though. You don't want to damage the board. And we'll come in on this side as well. Just a little more glue. Once again, just reach in there, pop that in. Just hold that pressure down for a moment. Next, we have this adapter, if you will. This is going to split our 4 lights into what will appear to be 8. I've painted this with a 24 karat gold paint just to add a little bit of reflectivity and color, particularly when it's powered down. Just want to come in here, make sure we got a good fit, which we do. And since this is a styrene connection that we're making, we're going to switch here over to some styrene cement. We have ourselves lined up, and there's our first connection point. Give ourselves just enough spacing there. There we go. 2 connection points. Push that in good. All right, so we've got those connected. Finally, we're going to slip the cap on, and this part can just be slipped in. There's no need for glue. You can glue it, there's no reason you can't, but all right. So we've got the fan blade spinning, and with the lights in, let us plug in that part of the board. And there you go. That's what it looks like right now, just with this level of construction. So from here, we're going to walk through how then that goes through. And I think what we'll do is we'll do a little bit of a time-lapse video so that you have an opportunity to see the steps, but we don't have to stay here all day to look for that. So why don't we get set up for that? All right. The next thing I'm going to do, and I wanted to stop and take a moment and explain this before I continue the time lapse. Now that we have the motor assembly in here, in doing my test setup, I found that the LEDs felt a little bright. So on the other side I did this, it didn't fully reduce it, but at this point I want to make sure I do this in a way that is even on both sides. I'm going to use some very thin plastic. This is actually taken from a milk jug. And what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to lay it in here over the clear portions, or the tinted, I should say, portions of the warp-filled grills. And this I'll then glue down with clear part glue. And this will help to even a little bit of that, of the hot spotting from the LEDs out. All right, so that's in there now. And we're gonna let that set for a few minutes just to set up and make sure that that glue is stable. And once that is done, we're gonna come back and we're gonna start in on the work of installing the lights. All right. So we now have all of our parts setting up inside the nacelle. I elected to use hot glue. I found that it set up a little bit quicker, allowed me to work through things a little bit faster. Super glue did not hold the first couple ones easily, just because there are some tight turns on the leads to the LEDs. So this is my preference. Obviously you could do this any way that you wanted to and that worked for you. Now let's just test and make sure everything is working before we think about buttoning this nacelle up a little bit. So we have 4 working LEDs for the nacelle field grid, or field vents, and then obviously the motor and the lights are working on the forward end. So now we're going to work on getting this put together. All right, so at this point, everything's pretty much taken care of. The seams are as clean as I'm going to be able to get them. I've given this a really good spray now with acrylic clear coat. We'll give it plenty of time to harden up. It's time to go ahead and get started with our Aztec decals. All right, so we're gonna start on the top of the saucer. And for the first decal, I'm gonna start back here in the starboard aft portion of the saucer section. Start there, I'm gonna work my way around. So remember, round 2 has some pretty specific instructions. These decals need to soak for a solid minute and then set aside for 2 minutes. So I'm gonna do that real quick and I'll be right back with you. All right, so we've got our first Aztec laid down. I've learned a few lessons with this one. The first lesson I have learned is to use more water than you think. I've had to do a little bit of repositioning here on a couple of sections. And so far it's not too bad. I've got one minor tear here that I think I'll be able to either fix or touch up with some paint. I'm just going to keep working with a wet paper towel, some of these ridged areas, working those air bubbles out to the edge of the decal. Now these are pretty large surface areas that you're working with here. So one alternative, if you wanted to, would be to set your decal up on the panel lines and maybe cut it down a little bit more. I'm going to give it another try on another decal without cutting it down any further. But that would be a potential way if you have any troubles to work through those. So again, just going to work this for a little bit and then we'll get started on the rest of the saucer. All right, so this is a stopping point for the moment. I need to allow the upper saucer to really set up. It's still wet, you can probably tell because it's very shiny. So a couple of initial observations. You definitely need to follow the decal instructions to the letter, but even if you do, you're going to have some instances where it's going to want to tend to get a little bit maybe gummy on you, so you want to be very careful. I used a really slick, multi-layer slick coat on this, and I still wound up finding in some areas that you can kind of see along in through here, as soon as the decal hit the model, it did not want to move. It became just completely stubborn. So some challenges with that. I'm very hopeful that as I get the other decals on, I'll be able to kind of work with that a little bit. Perhaps even knock some of that down after I clear coat the decals, maybe with a light hit from some sandpaper. Not too heavy, I don't want to go all the way through, but just to bring down some of these ridges. I did, as you can probably tell there, get a tear. You need to be patient with these. These decals, just doing the upper saucer here, following the instructions, took me a good solid hour and a half or so. So take your time with them. In terms of the quality of the render here, and the plating looks really good, and I kind of, it's going to be left up to the individual about whether you feel that this is a good look on the TOS style colors or not. You can definitely tell that this is made to enhance the metallics. Nothing wrong with that. I think it looks pretty good. It's very detailed. The details certainly stand out. Just be very careful as you apply. I'm going to go ahead and work on the rest of the model, and then we'll come back in our next video and see the finished product.